Before we begin, I want to make something absolutely clear. What you're about to hear is a fictional urban legend created for entertainment purposes. The House of Momo is a compilation of various haunted house folklore, internet creepypastas, and urban legends that have circulated online. No real individuals were harmed in the creation of this story. This is an exploration of how modern myths are born and why they captivate us. Now, with that said, let's dive into one of the internet's most chilling tales. Today we're exploring one of the most viral horror legends on the internet. The House of Momo. This story has everything: mysterious disappearances, supernatural encounters, and a haunting presence that has terrified millions of people online. What started as a simple creepypasta has evolved into something much bigger, with alleged video evidence, witness testimonies, and a mythology that continues to grow. The story centers on an abandoned house on a street we'll call Willow Creek Lane. According to the legend, locals claim strange figures appear behind cracked windows, eerie whispers echo through hallways at night, and visitors never leave quite the same. The house allegedly earned its name from an entity people call Momo, a tall, distorted figure that lurks in the shadows. But here's what makes this legend fascinating. Unlike most ghost stories that fade away, the House of Momo has persisted and evolved for over 2 decades online. It has spawned countless videos, investigations, and debates about what's real and what's fiction. What I find most interesting isn't whether the house is actually haunted. It's how this story spreads, why people believe it, and what it tells us about modern folklore in the internet age. Over the next 30 to 40 minutes, we'll break down the legend piece by piece, examine the alleged evidence, and explore the psychology behind why stories like this captivate millions. So turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's explore the House of Momo together. But remember, this is all fictional entertainment, a modern campfire story for the digital age. Every great urban legend needs an origin story, and the House of Momo is no exception. According to the fictional narrative that circulates online, the house was built in 1952 by a carpenter named Theodore Ashford and his family. For 15 years, it was supposedly just an ordinary suburban home where an ordinary family lived ordinary lives. But then, according to the legend, everything changed in 1967. The story goes that during a massive thunderstorm on October 23rd, something unexplainable happened. The family's teenage daughter, who we'll call Sarah in this version, a 17-year-old high school student, vanished from her locked bedroom. No forced entry. No footprints in the mud outside. No explanation. Now, before we go further, let me emphasize again. This is fictional. There's no verified missing person case connected to any real house. This is a story, a piece of modern mythology. But it's a compelling one because it taps into universal fears. The idea that someone could vanish from a locked room, that the safe space of home could become dangerous. These are primal anxieties. The legend continues that local police supposedly searched for weeks, but found nothing. The case went cold. The family eventually abandoned the house, unable to cope with the trauma. And here's where the story gets interesting from a folklore perspective. According to various versions of the tale, multiple families attempted to move into the house over the following decades. Each one reported strange occurrences before leaving. One family allegedly heard footsteps at night. Another claimed doors opened and closed by themselves. A third reported their teenage daughter talking to an invisible presence she called a friend in the walls. These are classic haunted house tropes that appear in folklore worldwide, which makes the story feel familiar and believable even though it's fiction. By the 1990s, according to the legend, the house had been abandoned completely. It fell into disrepair. Graffiti covered the walls. Windows broke. The yard became overgrown. And that's when it became a magnet for urban explorers, paranormal enthusiasts, and thrill seekers. This is also when the story starts to intersect with real internet culture. In the early 2000s, as digital cameras and video sharing became more accessible, people began documenting their visits to supposedly haunted locations. The House of Momo legend exploded during this era. Whether the house exists or not, the story certainly does. And like all good folklore, it evolved with each retelling, incorporating new details, new witnesses, and new pieces of alleged evidence. What I find fascinating is how the legend borrows from older stories. The vanishing from a locked room echoes classic, impossible crime mysteries. The family unable to escape their trauma mirrors the Amityville Horror. The house that drives out every occupant appears in everything from The Shining to Hell House. The House of Momo isn't original, but it is a perfect example of how traditional folklore adapts to the digital age. The House of Momo legend truly took off in 2003 when a video allegedly showing an exploration of the house went viral on early file sharing platforms. Now, whether this video shows a real location or was staged for entertainment, we may never know. But it's worth examining because it became the foundation for everything that followed. The video, according to those who claim to have seen the original, shows 5 young adults in their early 20s entering an abandoned house on Halloween night. They're armed with flashlights and what appears to be an early digital video camera. The footage quality is grainy, typical of that era's consumer technology. For those analyzing urban legends, this video is significant because it established many of the visual elements that would become associated with Momo. The tall, thin figure, the distorted appearance, the way it allegedly appears at a distance, watching. These details became canon, repeated in every subsequent retelling. The video allegedly shows the group exploring the house, finding remnants of its past. A broken piano, faded wallpaper, old furniture covered in dust. Standard abandoned building imagery. But then, according to descriptions, things take a turn. The group ventures upstairs, and that's when the alleged paranormal activity begins. One explorer claims to see a figure at the end of a hallway. The others don't see it initially. They investigate, finding nothing. But then, the story goes, every door in the hallway slams shut simultaneously. The group panics and runs. And in a few frames of shaky camera footage, something appears. A tall, dark shape with an elongated form. Now let's pause here and think critically. This is textbook horror movie structure. The slow build, the investigation, the sudden scare, the glimpse of the monster, and the panicked escape. It follows the formula perfectly, which doesn't mean it's fake, but it does mean we should approach it with healthy skepticism. What happened next is more interesting from a cultural perspective. The video spread across early internet forums and file sharing sites. People began analyzing it frame by frame. Debates erupted. Was it real or staged? Were the shadows genuine anomalies or editing tricks? The ambiguity fueled the legend's growth. This is where the House of Momo demonstrates something important about modern folklore. In the past, ghost stories spread through oral tradition, changing slightly with each telling. Now they spread through digital media, with video evidence that can be analyzed, debated, and shared infinitely. The video became the legend's proof, even though proof is exactly what it couldn't provide. Multiple people claimed to identify the location based on architectural details in the video. Others said they'd visited the house themselves and experienced similar phenomena. Each new account added layers to the mythology. Some explorers claimed to capture strange shadows on camera. Others reported unusual sounds on audio recordings. A few described feeling watched or experiencing sudden temperature drops. Here's what's psychologically interesting. Whether or not any of this is real, the expectations create the experience. If you enter an abandoned building expecting to be frightened, believing it haunted, your brain will interpret ambiguous stimuli as threatening. A creak becomes a footstep. A shadow becomes a figure. This doesn't make the experience less real to the person having it, but it does explain why so many people report similar encounters. The video also established a template. After it went viral, dozens of copycat videos appeared. Some were obvious fakes. Others were more convincing. The House of Momo had become a meme, a story template that people could adapt and recreate. This is how modern folklore works in the digital age. It's collaborative, participatory, and constantly evolving. So where does the name Momo come from? according to the legend's evolution. It wasn't until 2008 that the entity received its distinctive name. A paranormal investigation team allegedly spent multiple nights in the house, recording everything with professional equipment. During one session, their audio recorder supposedly captured a voice saying, "My name, Momo." Whether this EVP or electronic voice phenomenon is real or not, it's a perfect example of how legends crystallize around specific details. Once the entity had a name, it became more concrete in people's imagination. It went from being the thing in the house to being Momo, a distinct presence with an identity. But let's talk about what Momo represents. In folklore terms, Momo fits into a long tradition of liminal entities, beings that exist between states or categories. Not quite human, not quite spirit. Tall and thin, with distorted features. Always watching from a distance. Never fully seen, never entirely hidden. This archetype appears across cultures. The Japanese have their eerie. European folklore has various shadow people. American creepypasta culture created Slender Man, who shares many characteristics with Momo. These entities tap into primal fears about predators watching from the darkness, about things that look almost human but aren't quite right. Different interpretations of the Momo legend offer various explanations for what the entity might be. Some versions suggest it's the spirit of someone who died in the house decades ago, transformed by tragedy into something no longer recognizable. Other interpretations paint Momo as something older, an entity that was always in that location, perhaps drawn to places of sadness and fear. There's a third interpretation that I find particularly interesting from a psychological perspective. Some folklore researchers who've studied the legend suggest that Momo might be what's called a tulpa or thought form. This is the idea that if enough people believe in something strongly enough, they can collectively create it through the power of belief and expectation. In this interpretation, Momo didn't exist before people started looking for it. But as more people visited the location, expecting to encounter something terrifying, their collective fear and belief gave shape to the entity. It's a fascinating concept because it blurs the line between fiction and reality, suggesting that belief itself has creative power. Now, I'm not saying I believe in tulpas or thought forms, but I do think there's psychological truth in the idea that our expectations shape our experiences. If 100 people visit a location expecting to see a tall, thin figure with distorted features, some of them will interpret ambiguous visual information as matching that description. Pattern recognition is a powerful cognitive tool, but it can also create patterns where none exist. The consistency of Momo descriptions is often cited as evidence of the entity's reality. Witnesses across different years allegedly describe the same thing. Tall, thin, elongated face, distorted features, appears at a distance, moves in an unnatural way. But consistency can also come from people being familiar with the legend before their visit. They know what they're supposed to see, so that's what they report seeing. One alleged encounter from 2011 describes a teenage explorer seeing Momo descending a staircase. The movement was supposedly jerky and puppet-like, as if the entity didn't quite understand how human locomotion works. This is a great detail because it adds to the uncanny valley effect. Something that looks human but moves wrong is deeply disturbing to our pattern recognition systems. In 2014, motion-activated cameras allegedly captured something unusual. Shadows appearing without objects to cast them. Shapes forming and dissolving. Temperature changes recorded on thermal sensors. These are the kinds of details that keep the legend alive because they suggest technological corroboration. It's not just eyewitness testimony anymore, it's data. But here's the thing about data. It can be misinterpreted, manipulated, or fabricated. Shadows can be created through clever lighting. Thermal sensors can malfunction or be tricked. Even video footage can be edited convincingly, especially as technology improves. The existence of alleged evidence doesn't necessarily prove the existence of the phenomenon. What makes the Momo legend compelling isn't necessarily whether it's true. It's the fact that it feels true. It follows the rules of good horror storytelling. It has a mysterious entity, a cursed location, a tragic backstory, and accumulating evidence. Whether real or fictional, it's an effective story that resonates with fundamental human fears. Let's step back from the legend itself and examine why stories like the House of Momo spread so effectively in the first place. What is it about haunted house tales that makes them so enduring, especially in the internet age? Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a real cultural anthropologist at Columbia University who studies urban legends, has identified several key characteristics that successful folklore shares. First, effective legends are grounded in something real or plausible. They need a kernel of truth or at least believability. The House of Momo works because abandoned houses exist, mysterious disappearances happen, and urban exploration is a real hobby. Second, successful legends evolve over time. They're not static stories, but living narratives that incorporate new details with each retelling. Notice how the Momo legend has grown from a simple haunted house tale to a complex mythology involving EVP recordings, thermal imaging, multiple witness testimonies, and video evidence. Each new piece adds legitimacy and depth. Third, urban legends reflect cultural anxieties and fears. The House of Momo taps into several contemporary worries. The fear that something terrible could happen to young people in places that seem ordinary. The anxiety about liminal spaces, those in-between places that are no longer what they were, but haven't become something new. The concern that there are things in the world we can't explain or control. The internet has fundamentally changed how folklore spreads. In the past, ghost stories traveled through oral tradition, person to person, community to community. They changed gradually as different storytellers emphasized different elements. Now folklore spreads globally and instantly through social media, video platforms, and forums. A story can reach millions of people in days. This digital transmission creates interesting effects. On one hand, stories can spread faster and wider than ever before. On the other hand, they're subject to immediate scrutiny and debunking. The House of Momo exists in this tension between belief and skepticism, with each side gathering evidence to support their interpretation. Here's something fascinating about belief. You don't need to consciously believe in something for it to affect you. Studies have shown that even skeptics who visit supposedly haunted locations often report feeling uneasy, regardless of whether they think ghosts are real. The power of suggestion, the atmosphere, the expectations, all of these create genuine psychological and physical responses. If you enter an abandoned building that's rumored to be haunted, your body responds. Your heart rate increases. Your pupils dilate. Your hearing becomes more acute. You're in a state of heightened alertness because your brain interprets the situation as potentially dangerous. In this state, you're more likely to notice small sounds, shadows, and movements that you'd normally ignore. This is where the concept of apophenia comes in. That's the human tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random information. Our brains are exceptionally good at finding patterns because throughout evolution, the cost of missing a pattern, like a predator in the shadows, was much higher than the cost of seeing a pattern that isn't there. So we're biased toward detecting patterns, even false ones. When you're in a dark, unfamiliar environment expecting to encounter something scary, your pattern detection goes into overdrive. A shadow becomes a figure. A creak becomes a footstep. Random noise becomes a voice. Your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do, keeping you alert to potential threats. But in the process, it might be creating the very phenomena you're looking for. None of this necessarily means ghosts aren't real or that the House of Momo isn't haunted. What it means is that we need to be aware of how our own psychology influences our experiences. The human mind is a powerful thing, capable of creating vivid, convincing experiences based on expectation and belief. Some skeptics have proposed natural explanations for haunted house phenomena. Infrasound, which is sound below the range of human hearing, can create feelings of unease and even visual hallucinations. Carbon monoxide from decaying materials can cause cognitive effects, hallucinations, and feelings of dread. Electromagnetic fields might affect the temporal lobe of the brain, creating experiences interpreted as supernatural. These explanations are worth considering, but they also don't account for everything reported in places like the alleged House of Momo. The consistency of descriptions, the video and audio evidence, however questionable, the multiple independent witnesses who report similar experiences. Either all of these people are lying, mistaken, or experiencing the same natural phenomena in remarkably similar ways, or there's something else happening that we don't fully understand. This is where I think the conversation gets most interesting. Maybe the question isn't, is it real or fake, but rather, what do we mean by real? If hundreds or thousands of people have genuine experiences at a location, experiences that affect them emotionally and psychologically, does it matter whether those experiences have a supernatural cause or a natural explanation? The experiences are real to the people having them. Let's bring the story into the present day. According to recent iterations of the legend, the house that supposedly inspired the Momo story was purchased in 2022 by a real estate development company planning to demolish it. This triggered protests from paranormal enthusiasts and even some historical preservation groups, who argued the location had cultural significance. Whether this is true or just the latest chapter in the evolving legend, it illustrates something important. The House of Momo has taken on a life beyond its origins. It's no longer just a story, but a cultural touchstone, a piece of modern mythology that people feel invested in preserving. In recent years, several YouTubers and content creators have claimed to visit the location or a location they identify as the House of Momo. These videos rack up hundreds of thousands or even millions of views. People are endlessly fascinated by the question of whether it's real, whether Momo exists, whether something genuinely paranormal is happening in this allegedly cursed house. One particularly popular video from last year shows a creator spending a night in what he claims is the house, live streaming the experience. Over 200,000 people watched in real time. During the stream, nothing obviously paranormal happened, though the creator reported feeling watched and uncomfortable. But when he reviewed the footage later, he found something disturbing in a mirror reflection. A tall figure standing behind him, visible in the glass, but not in the room when the camera turned around. The debate about this footage has been intense. Digital forensics experts have examined it. Some find no evidence of manipulation. Others insist it must be edited. Believers point to it as proof. Skeptics remain unconvinced. And the truth, whatever it might be, remains elusive. This is the nature of modern folklore. We exist in an age where everything can be documented, analyzed, and debated. But somehow that doesn't make the mysteries go away. If anything, it creates more questions. Is that footage real? How would someone fake it convincingly? Why would they bother? What do they gain from continuing the legend? So after exploring the history, the encounters, the evidence, and the psychology, where does that leave us? What can we conclude about the House of Momo? Here's what I think we can say with confidence. The House of Momo is a perfect example of modern internet folklore. Whether it began as fiction, misidentification, genuine paranormal activity, or some combination of all three, it has become a shared cultural narrative that resonates with millions of people. It taps into universal fears while adapting to contemporary technology and communication methods. The legend succeeds because it maintains ambiguity. There's enough alleged evidence to convince believers, enough inconsistencies to satisfy skeptics, and enough mystery to keep everyone engaged. It's a Rorschach test, where people see what they're predisposed to see. Does Momo exist? Is there really a haunted house where a mysterious entity watches from the shadows? I can't answer that definitively. What I can say is that the story exists, and stories have power. They shape how we see the world, what we fear, what we believe is possible. If you're a believer in the supernatural, the House of Momo represents evidence that there are forces beyond our understanding, entities that exist in the spaces between life and death. If you're a skeptic, it represents how suggestion, psychology, and the power of storytelling can create experiences that feel real even when they're not. If you're somewhere in between, it's a fascinating case study in how truth and fiction blur in the digital age. The real question isn't whether you believe in Momo. It's what the legend tells us about ourselves, our fears, our need for mystery in an increasingly explained world. We live in an age where science can answer most questions, where satellites map every inch of the planet, where information is instantly available. And yet we still tell ghost stories. We still seek out the unexplained. We still want to believe there's more to reality than what we can measure and quantify. Maybe that's what the House of Momo really represents. Not a specific haunted building, but the human desire for mystery, for wonder, for the possibility that the world is stranger and more complex than we imagine. It's a modern campfire tale, shared not around flickering flames, but through glowing screens, connecting people across the globe through shared curiosity and fear. Whether you visit the alleged location, watch videos about it, or simply enjoy the story, you become part of a legend. You contribute to its evolution. And in doing so, you participate in one of humanity's oldest traditions, the telling and retelling of stories that help us make sense of the darkness. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of the House of Momo legend. Remember, this has been Fictional Entertainment, a look at how modern myths are created and spread. If you enjoyed this deep dive into internet folklore, let me know in the comments what other urban legends you'd like me to explore. Subscribe for more content examining the stories that captivate and terrify us. Until next time, stay curious, think critically, and remember that sometimes the most interesting truth isn't whether a story is real or fake, but why we need to tell it in the first place. Because, in the end, every legend teaches us something about being human. And who knows, maybe somewhere out there, in an abandoned house on a forgotten street, something really is watching from the shadows. Or maybe the only monsters that exist are the ones we create in our own minds. Either way, the story continues, evolving with each person who hears it and wonders, could it be true? Sweet dreams, everyone.